welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, founder of SaaStock, and I am delighted to be joined today by Elias Rubel, who's the CEO of Mattermade. Welcome, Elias. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Alex. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, great to have you on. Where are you calling in from?
I am in Denver, Colorado at the moment.
Okay, very good. At the moment, are you usually based there, or is this a temporary thing?
Yeah, I bounce between here and San Francisco. So, here for the winter, enjoying
cool.
the snow.
Any preference? Do you prefer Denver or San Francisco, or is it each very different?
They're so different. I mean, I miss the water when I'm in Denver, and I miss the mountains when I'm in San Francisco. So,
very cool. And we're recording this. It's the day before Thanksgiving. So are you going to take a couple of days off? Like, how do you spend Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we're headed up to the mountains. We've got a cabin in the woods by a lake. And so just headed there with some family and unwinding, build a fire, sit around the fireplace, low key.
Sounds, well, you say low key, but sounds idyllic.
Yeah.
So, my next couple of days, obviously we don't have Thanksgiving in London, and the next couple of days are going to be spent in London, lots of meetings, working. So I aspire to be living a Thanksgiving dream in a cabin in Denver. But good stuff. But Elias, so I always ask the guests first question, so we get to know them a little bit better. So who is Elias Rubel?
Yeah, I mean, my journey is a little bit weird and winding. I don't think I can be pinned to one thing in particular. I went to art school originally, dropped out of art school, founded a SaaS company, raised venture funds. That company was acquired in 2014. I then went out, rode my motorcycle across Central America, came back, was feeling rejuvenated, acquired an e-commerce company, did a 4-year turnaround, sold that to private equity. And then all the while, our original investors in that first SaaS business had been plugging me into their portfolio, helping with early stage growth, marketing. And I realized that I could be a lot more effective if I had my own team, and also just frankly missed having my own team, but had this realization that they didn't just need strategy, they also needed execution, arms and legs. And so I hired up all my favorite B2B marketers, and that was what became Mattermade.
Very cool. So riding a motorcycle across South America, how long does that take? And is it just the fresh air that rejuvenates you, just the time of work, the space that gave you mentally?
Yeah. I mean, all of that. Central America was an absolute trip. I started in Portland, Oregon on a BMW motorcycle with some knobby tires and rode with a buddy down through Mexico. We covered once we left Mexico, we covered every Central American country except for Belize over the course of about 2.5 months. A mixture of camping, staying in hostels. At one night, we slept on top of chicken freezers where they had like frozen chicken meat because we had been chased at gunpoint down a hill. So, we kind of saw it all. And the idea was really, just to do something that would take my mind off the grind that we had just been through, get the fresh air, meet interesting people, have conversations that weren't insular to the industry that I'd been obsessed with for the prior 3-4 years, and it accomplished all those things.
Why were you chased at gunpoint down the hill? Were you in an area that you shouldn't have been?
Man, I wasn't expecting to tell the story on the podcast, but I'm happy to. Yeah, it's funny when I tell people we did this trip, everybody's like, "Oh man, this sounds so dangerous. I can't believe you rode through all those places." And honestly, I feel bad even telling the story because 99.9% of the entire trip felt totally safe, incredibly welcoming and warm. And the fact that we got ourselves into a situation was entirely our own fault. So the number one rule aside from wear all your gear, of course, is don't ride at night, right? And the same reason you wouldn't ride through certain parts of Chicago or Los Angeles at night by yourself on a shiny, expensive motorcycle, you wouldn't do that in, certain countries or cities elsewhere. So we found ourselves having poorly timed this one particular trip through rural Guatemala, and we thought everything was going well, and then the road literally just ended. It went from being this beautiful paved road to a bunch of rocks, and you could tell they were building the road still. And so we were supposed to arrive right before sundown. We ended up climbing this hill at about 5 miles an hour, just pounding it out on these rocks around midnight. And as we were cresting this hill, there were some folks who were essentially just waiting for anybody traveling at night to shake them down and rob. And thankfully there was a group of people there. I think they were construction workers, and they flagged us down, and they were like, warning us, hey, don't keep going. There's bad stuff ahead. And we couldn't tell, our at that time, our Spanish wasn't the best. And so we were trying to understand exactly what they were trying to communicate. And all of a sudden they ran behind this dump truck, and then assault rifle fire came from over the hill. And then this truck came flying over the hill, and we turned around and started booking it down the hill and got chased by this truck for a little while. And it turns out, the construction workers were trying to warn us, and then the bandits realized what was going down and chased after us. And that was when we found at the bottom of this hill, once we'd created some distance from this truck, this family that was closing up their local tienda. And we explained to them what was happening. They're like, oh, well, come sleep inside of our tienda. Like, it's safe. You'll be fine. And so that's how we ended up sleeping on top of a chicken freezer in the middle of rural Guatemala. It was a hell of a night.
Very cool. Very cool. We appreciate you sharing that. And so after you sort of say being refreshed, you started to contact, some of the best marketers that you knew or know still, and created Mattermade, right? So what is Mattermade? What does it do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, most people would call Mattermade an agency, but I don't even like to call us an agency. Where we help drive down cost to acquire and help drive pipeline for, the fastest growing SaaS companies out there. We've worked with companies like Product Board, Loom, Dropbox, Hopin, Grain, list goes on and on. But generally we're brought in and thought of when the challenge is, even the fastest growing companies struggle, and this sounds like a non-statement, it's obvious, but as you grow really quickly, your cost to acquire creeps up. And another commonality is you're growing, but you don't always know why, or you don't always know exactly what's driving that growth. And so we're brought in to help get cost to acquire under control and then scale that demand efficiently.
What are some of the interesting lessons you can share? So you mentioned some great names there. I think I know most of them, but yeah, what can you share from working with the likes? It doesn't have to specifically be like Dropbox, Loom, Calm, etc.
Yeah,
it'd be good to know.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is a lot of these companies, and again, it's a result of growing quickly, but some of the fundamentals end up being where the most opportunity is. And so we run all of these companies through what we call the demand efficiency framework. So demand efficiency is a leading indicator for reducing cost to acquire. Marketing traditionally is seen as a black box, I think, to a lot of non-marketing leadership. And so having helped, 10, 15 of these $1 billion plus companies grow or get to that milestone every year, we started seeing patterns in what was really driving results and patterns in what was really holding these companies back as far as having an efficient cost to acquire and then being able to scale that without giving up that efficient cost to acquire. And so we built out this very objective framework where we could actually score how a company was doing. And then that painted a roadmap for how we could then systematically improve both of those key metrics, right? Cost to acquire reduction and qualified pipeline growth or revenue. And kind of in doing so, also created this blueprint for non-marketing execs and their boards to understand why things were being prioritized and what was being prioritized, rather than having it be more of a black box where the marketing leader, the onus is completely on the marketing leader to tell the story, put together the board slides. This was something that could really supplement. And so I think that's been the pattern across all of these engagements, is running them through that demand efficiency framework and then systematically being able to put the wins on the board that we've promised. Loom, for example, we drove 69% month increase in signups while reducing their acquisition costs by 23%. Product Board, 99% month over month enterprise pipeline growth. The list kind of keeps going on and on. Obviously, we've got a bunch of case studies and stories to tell on that front. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I think you mentioned there just a little bit in terms of like what demand efficiency is. And I think like before we had our kind of like a pre-call to this, I like personally, I'd never heard of the term demand efficiency. I don't necessarily work in the demand generation or performance kind of like marketing sort of aspects, but again, I guess for the sake of the audience, like a one sentence in terms of what demand efficiency is, but also why should we care now?
Yeah, no, those are two great questions. So the what is it? It's a leading indicator for teams that are looking to reduce cost to acquire. If you think about cost to acquire, typically you have to do a bunch of activity and then wait and see how it shakes out. And it takes time. And there isn't, prior to demand efficiency as a KPI, there hasn't been a leading indicator to guide you and to say, okay, how are we tracking towards this cost to acquire reduction before we can see how it all shakes out in the bottom. So simply put, yeah, it's a leading indicator for reducing cost to acquire. It looks at the top 2/3 of the revenue funnel. So, tofu, mofu, as well as the handoff and partnership between sales and marketing. So that's what it is. As far as why now, you think about all the pressure in the market and rightfully so, good pressure, right? All companies should strive to be as efficient as possible. It's, again, a non-statement, but there's a lot of pressure from boards, investors, execs to systematically reduce cost to acquire and get as efficient as possible. And so I think arming teams with this common language and common framework and an objective framework at that for how do we accomplish reducing our cost to acquire and how can we communicate that with non-marketing leaders, it's an incredibly powerful tool for companies to leverage now. Yeah.
And what about then, so we're in this sort of market downturn, we're in a recession, we're hearing that, next year, could be even worse, and hearing whether in SaaS or not, people saying like, hold on to money and, cut costs, right? And we've gone through this sort of, I guess, kind of not so long ago, but, in a different way in the pandemic as well. A lot of uncertainty in the market and, marketing and, I mean, in cost-cutting exercise, marketing often seems to get, hit pretty hard. And I'm seeing it on LinkedIn, quite a lot at the moment. What are your thoughts like around that? Because I've also seen that I totally get it. Like cutting costs it's something like, and being more careful and frugal in these times and in certain times makes a lot of sense. There are also some companies that will, in some ways, kind of look at the uncertainty and the kind of recessions, and maybe whether it's being smarter or just being a little bit more aggressive and kind of playing to win and try and to I don't know, come out the other side and really kind of either make up grounds in terms of where they are against their competitors, or really kind of pull ahead of them. What are your thoughts? Is it horses for courses? It kind of depends? Or do you prefer, don't slash marketing budgets and go, aggressive? What does Matamate say, to its clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a strong focus. If you look at the talking heads in marketing, there's a strong focus on demand capture, demand creation. These are two terms we hear a lot. And I think marketers, in a way, we shoot ourselves in our own feet by just focusing on these pieces, because we train the broader exec team leadership that, these are the only spaces that we need to focus. And thereby it's easy for them to think about cutting resources outside of those two specific areas, right? But when you think about, and this is part of the education that we need to do in the market, when you think about optimizing for cost to acquire and really improving demand efficiency, it's not necessarily those two spaces where you're going to find that. That's kind of like the obvious simple kind of let's be as technically excellent in channel as possible. But it'd be easy for an exec team to say, great, we're going to go, if you're an in-house team, it's easy for them to say, great, we're going to get rid of this team and go with an agency. Or if you're working with an agency, they just turn the screws tighter and say, hey, like figure this out or die kind of a thing. But it's missing the bigger picture, right? Demand efficiency and cost to acquire, it's driven by all of the connective tissue in all of the less obvious spaces and on aggregate. So what do I mean by that? If you think about the buyer journey and all of the different touch points, I call it connective tissue or surfaces, all the different surfaces that a buyer touches and goes through from their very first experience with your brand all the way through to becoming a customer and converting to revenue, right? That isn't just about demand capture and demand creation, because those two things are channel specific and technical. But there are all of these handoffs that happen. There are all of these touch points that happen. And each one of those, if you look at those individually and find ways to improve them, right? You might be looking at, in some cases, there could be a big lift, but let's just benefit of the doubt, be really conservative and say each one of those touch points you maybe could improve by 1%, 0.5%, 1%, something like that. But there are like 50 or more of these touch points, right? Like connective pieces, surfaces. And so that's 50% potential improvement to your cost to acquire if you look at them on the whole. The problem is that because each one of these is so kind of niche and individual, a lot of the time they get deprioritized as compared to those bigger buckets, because it's harder to go to your leadership team or your board and say, our marketing org is working on all these little kind of things that don't actually sound that important by themselves. But the reality is in aggregate, they're wildly important, and you could cut your cost to acquire in half by really focusing on them holistically and operationalizing improvement across all of those surfaces. And so that's really the core of demand efficiency, is zooming out, looking at all of that connective tissue, stack ranking them and prioritizing them as far as how much they could impact that cost to acquire, and then creating programs to systematically improve.
And with our audience, those that are listening to the podcast, it's predominantly founders, SaaS founders that are, the earliest stage of their businesses. So what should they be doing, after hearing about demand efficiency? Hopefully they knew about it before, but what should they be doing about it, and how to go about implementing it in your business? Yeah,
this one's easy. I mean, a freebie for the audience for sure. The nice thing about the demand efficiency framework is we've open sourced it. So as a founder, you can go to, or an exec, you can go to mattermade.co/demand efficiency. And there you'll be able to have your team, whether it's you or your team, you can give them the link to take the demand efficiency survey. And then that will give them a score and benchmark and compare them to the best in the industry, right? So part of this is that we've built up an index or a benchmark, if you will, of how all of the fastest growing, most efficient companies are performing on the demand efficiency index. And so any founder can go fill this out and see how you stack up by industry, by funding stage. So that just gives you kind of a sense of where you stand. But then it'll also give you the low-hanging fruit. It'll show you, hey, systematically, here's what you could have your team focus on to get to that promised land, to improve that cost to acquire. So this isn't something that's proprietary to us, that, in the sense that we need to help you execute it, but really something to make, especially if you're a non-marketing founder, make marketing less of a black box, make reducing cost to acquire less of a black box. So yeah, mattermade.co/demand efficiency. Highly recommend either sending your teams there to take that survey or fill it out yourself.
Very cool. And I know you mentioned some results of, some of the companies that you work with like earlier, but regarding demand efficiency here, is there anything additional that you kind of share, that companies have this demand efficiency mindset and, the benefits that they're getting from that?
Yeah, I mean, just going through some of our cases where we've rolled this out. I mean, Dropbox, we increased their conversions through funnel 6.5x. I mentioned Loom, we reduced their cost to acquire down 23%. G2 costs down 25%. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Hotel Engine, we reduced their costs down 15%. So it's same with Localize. I mean, there's just, the list kind of keeps going on where we ran these companies through our own framework. And at the time we hadn't open sourced it yet. It was just, this was our internal system for auditing opportunity to reduce cost to acquire and drive qualified revenue. But now in retrospect, now that we've open sourced this for other folks to appreciate, leverage, and learn from, pretty much all of our best case studies where we've driven down that cost to acquire have been a result of running them through this process.
Very cool. Well, moving on to the sort of quickish fire round. What one thing has moved the needle for you the most in your career?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, I think it's taking care of myself. And that sounds maybe corny, but whenever I've let that slip, like taking care of my body, physical health, taking care of my mind, and prioritizing those two things, whenever I've let those slip, my work performance has suffered. My ability to inspire others has suffered. My ability to recruit has suffered. All of the ways in which I need to be a leader suffer when I'm not taking care of myself as an individual. So I think that's probably the biggest for me.
What are a couple of ways that you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty religious about going to the gym and moving heavy weights around. I like to generally have some sort of competitive sport in my life. I find that especially for folks who are in the industries that we're in, and it occupies a lot of your mind share. If you're in my case out competitively rowing or getting beat up playing hockey, you can't really be thinking. You can't be daydreaming about what's happening at work. Your mind is 100% singularly focused on not getting crushed against the boards or falling out of your boat or winning the race, whatever it is. Like you're singularly focused on being present. And so in and of itself, I find that to be a bit of a meditation. And then of course the physical benefits of having a daily practice, getting your heart rate up, spending a certain amount of time in certain heart rate zones, it's incredibly beneficial.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Yeah, this question's funny because I was reflecting back on this. I think a little fun fact about me. I went to art school. I dropped out after the first year, and I don't have a degree. I never went back. And the only thing, well, not the only thing, but the one piece of knowledge or advice that was doled out then that has become incredibly impactful and true to this day in this season of my career. I remember an instructor saying something like, look around you today. You never know what the person next to you is going to become, and don't underestimate what they can become. Especially for competitive people, you're kind of thinking about how you're gonna rise to the top and you're gonna be the best, but don't think about it that way. Think about what other people around you can become and how you can be resources to each other. And I remember, cocky 20-year-old me was like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to be the top, the best, whatever. And over time, I've really seen this prove out and reassessed and reevaluated how I view the peers and friends and people that I encounter in the industry. And it's so true. Like, you never know where people are going to end up. Rising tide floats all boats. And so I think looking at everyone that you meet and assuming that they're going to rise to the occasion of whatever it is that they're trying to seek in their career and in their life, and seeing how you can support them creates a stronger community, and it makes you better at what you do ultimately.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like that one. What's the biggest failure you've made and lesson learned from it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I let impostor syndrome. I didn't go to college, and for me, that was a big chip on my shoulder for a long time. I let that drive actions and hold me back in ways that I shouldn't have. And it took the realization of having hired a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me to realize that everyone, regardless of how deep their skill set is, struggles with imposter syndrome in some capacity. And so, it's only if you let it hold you back, hold your actions back, that it's a real problem. And so, yeah, I think that's probably my biggest failure was letting imposter syndrome drive for as long as I did. And the lesson learned is, hey, everybody's got it. So just give yourself the benefit of the doubt and push forward.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely, as you say, pretty much everybody's got it, but not everybody admits to it. But what's the hardest thing about building Matt's Made?
Yeah, I think everybody's in a hurry, right? Everybody's in a hurry to get to results. Everybody's in a hurry to get to the next milestone. And not everybody is eager to take a step back and learn how they can get there faster by slowing down. That's a lesson. It's like in racing, smooth is fast. And sometimes you have to go slow to go smooth. But ultimately, that helps you go fast. And so it's a challenge to teach people that lesson and to captivate enough of their trust to say, hey, let us show you why slowing down to accomplish these things will ultimately speed you up, immeasurably. And as a big education challenge, it requires us, really investing into the community and not just going out and doing the work, because you have to buy the trust and space to do the work in the first place. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is just ourselves remembering to slow down, teach people, bring them along for the ride so that we can all rise together.
What does your daily routine look like?
Ooh, I'm very routine driven, as I'm sure probably everybody is in our industry. I wake up in the morning. I try to read before I wake our daughter up, or she's already awake. I go get her. She's 14 months old and the best. Then we spend the first 2 hours of our day together before dropping her off. Get into the work routine. I don't eat breakfast. I have a liquid lunch. I'm big into measuring everything that I consume, so everything's tracked. And then I've learned about myself, I have this slump right after lunch typically. And so for the longest time, I tried to push through that. Now what I've done is that becomes my gym time. Get out of my seat, go move the weights around, get my heart rate up, rather than just sitting at the screen and not being super productive. Mm-hmm. Come back, finish up the work day, spend more time with our daughter, dinner, read, meditate, go to sleep. Sometimes watch TV with my wife. Other times just sit in bed together doing our own thing. So yeah, it's a typical day.
As you've got a 14-month-old, I mean, this might impact this answer, but how many hours a night sleep do you get, or do you aim for?
We've been really lucky to get an amazing sleeper, at least so far. And so I get no less than 8 hours of sleep every night. Try to push that to 8.5 on average. I track it all. So yeah, that's important to me. I'm a zombie of a human if I don't get it.
Very good. And then final questions, Elias. So what are you looking forward to in 2023? And if anything, what are you most concerned about?
I am looking forward to seeing how the industry pulls together. I think that the community will become more tight-knit just based on everything that's going on in the market. Everybody's truly going to be slogging through it and figuring out how to make it a productive time, how to improve. And I think that will require a lot more collaboration, a lot more closeness. Not to say that it was lacking that, but I just think in boom times, it's easy for everybody to just, we're going to go off and win in our own silo. And I think next year there's going to be a lot more collaboration, a lot more partnerships. And I'm just excited to see what kind of innovation comes out of our space, given the constraints that are going to be prevalent probably through most of 2023 and 2024.
And finally, where can people find you online?
Yep. So mattermade.co. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn, Elias Rubel. And if they want to take the demand efficiency survey, it's mattermade.co/demand efficiency.
Cool. Very cool. Well, Elias, thanks so much for being a great guest on the SaaS Revolution Show today. Wishing you, your family, a great Thanksgiving in the Denver cabin. Something I'll be sort of dreaming of later, but obviously not living the dream. But great stuff. Really love having you in the show today. We'll be seeing you again, I think, next year at SaaStock USA. So thanks so much, Elias Rubel from Mattermade.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be on the show.